I stood in the middle of the kitchen, the cold tile beneath my feet feeling like ice against my skin. "Anna, did you even hear me?" Mrs. Thompson's voice was sharp, a knife slicing through the tense air. I turned, meeting her stern gaze. "I heard you, Mrs. Thompson. You want fish for dinner." "And not just any fish," she insisted, her eyes narrowing. "Get tuna, the fresh kind. Lily loves it." As if on cue, Lily, my 16-year-old stepdaughter, strutted into the kitchen, her phone glued to her ear. She barely acknowledged my presence, her eyes rolling dramatically. Fish again? I want a burger. Go get me one, Anna." The demands weren't new, but they stung each time. I was more a servant than a family member in this house. A deep breath steadied my voice. "But I'm already preparing dinner." Lily cut me off. "So I want a burger. Can't you do that one little thing for me?" Mrs. Thompson chimed in, her voice laced with feigned concern. "She's just a kid who wants a burger, Anna. It's not about being stingy." The word stingy hung in the air, a label I'd become too familiar with in this household. They had no idea about the financial tightrope we were walking on. My job in administration barely covered the essentials, and Michael's sporadic earnings as a struggling writer added little. "Fine, I'll get the burger," I muttered, feeling a familiar knot of frustration in my stomach. As I turned to leave, Lily's voice stopped me. "And I need $100. I spun around, disbelief written across my face. $100? For what? "There's this new game everyone has. I need it." I looked towards Mrs. Thompson, hoping for some semblance of reason. Instead, she nodded in agreement. "Poor thing. She needs to fit in with her friends. Give her the money, Anna." "But this month's budget is already stretched thin," I protested weakly. Mrs. Thompson's expression hardened. "Are you suggesting we're not entitled to Michael's royalties? What kind of stepmother are you?" "A stepmother trying to keep us afloat," I wanted to say. But the words never came. Instead, I reached for my purse, the weight of their expectations heavier than the coins and notes it contained. The evening air was crisp as I returned from the store, bags weighing down my arms. Inside them, a symbol of my surrender, a tuna and a burger. As I entered the house, the scent of disdain was more pungent than the food's aroma. "Finally," Lily scoffed, snatching the bag with the burger. "Took you long enough." I set the tuna on the kitchen counter, meeting Mrs. Thompson's scrutinizing gaze. "Here's the fish, Mrs. Thompson." She inspected it with a frown. "It could be fresher. Next time, put in more effort, Anna." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. Michael was in his study, probably lost in his world of make-believe literary fame. I longed for him to see the reality, our dwindling savings, the mounting bills, and his family's insatiable demands. Later that night I lay in bed, the moon casting shadows across the room. Michael's voice broke the silence. "Anna, you seem distant lately. Is everything okay?" I turned to face him, the moonlight revealing his oblivious expression. "It's just your family, and our finances. It's overwhelming." He brushed off my concerns with a wave of his hand. "Don't worry about money. Writers don't. It stifles creativity. And my family, well, they're just set in their ways." "But Michael, the reality is—" I started, but he interrupted. "Reality is subjective. In my world, my next novel will be a bestseller. You'll see." I wanted to scream, to shake him into seeing the truth. But I bit my tongue, a tear escaping down my cheek. I turned away, the unsaid words festering in my heart. The next morning, Lily's taunts and Mrs. Thompson's criticisms resumed. As I prepared breakfast, I overheard Lily talking to her friend on the phone. "She's so pathetic, pretending to be our mom. I wish Dad would just divorce her already." The words pierced through me like icy daggers. I wanted to confront her, to defend myself, but I remained silent, my hands trembling as I poured the coffee. At work, my colleague Jane noticed my forlorn expression. "Anna, you okay? You've seemed off lately." I sighed, the dam of my emotions ready to burst. "It's just home stuff, you know how it is." Jane leaned in, her voice a whisper. "If it's that bad, maybe it's time to think about yourself. You deserve happiness too, you know." Just her words echoed in my mind all day. Happiness, a distant dream smothered by the burden of illusions I was living under. The world outside was bathed in a soft, golden hue of the setting sun, but inside, the walls of the house felt like they were closing in on me. It had been another day of juggling insults and managing the impossible demands of my stepfamily. As I entered the living room, the sight that greeted me stopped me dead in my tracks. Half of the furniture was gone. The room, once cluttered with Mrs. Thompson's countless knickknacks and Lily's gadgets, was now eerily empty. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I reached for my phone, dialing Michael's number. It rang and rang, until finally his voice came through, distant and cold. "Anna, you noticed, huh?" "What's going on, Michael? Where is everything?" His laugh was hollow. "We've moved, Anna, to a high-rise condo. A fresh start, you know?" My heart pounded in my chest. A fresh start? Without me? "You can join us if you want, but you'll need to apologize first." "Apologize? For what? Keeping us from bankruptcy? For enduring their endless ridicule?" In the background I could hear Lily's voice, laced with malice. "She finally realized she's not wanted. Good riddance." Mrs. Thompson's voice joined the chorus. "Michael deserves better. Someone who appreciates his talent." Their words were like venom, and with each syllable, the last threads of my attachment to this family frayed and snapped. "Michael," I said, my voice steady, "I won't be joining you. I hope you find what you're looking for in your new condo." There was a pause, and then a scoff. "How noble of you, Anna." The call ended, leaving me in a silence that was both suffocating and liberating. The next few days were a blur. I packed my belongings, each item a reminder of a life filled with false hopes and unreciprocated love. The divorce papers arrived soon after, with Michael's signature scrawled across them. As I signed them, a sense of freedom washed over me. This was the point of no return. I was leaving behind the life of a woman scorned, and stepping into a future where my worth wasn't tied to the whims of a family that never saw me as one of their own. I left the house for the last time, the divorce papers in my bag. The world outside seemed different now, brighter, full of possibilities. I was no longer Anna, the unwanted stepmother. I was just Anna, and that was enough. The first morning in my new apartment greeted me with a quiet that was both unfamiliar and comforting. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the sparse yet cozy space I now called home. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. Sitting at my small dining table, I sipped my coffee and reflected on the whirlwind of changes. I had left behind the toxic environment of my previous life, and, with it, the shadows that had clung to my spirit. Now it was just me, my thoughts, and the blank pages of a notebook that lay open in front of me. Writing had always been a secret passion of mine, a hidden outlet for my emotions. But in the chaos of my life with Michael and his family, it had been pushed aside, forgotten. Now the words flowed effortlessly, as if they had been waiting just beneath the surface, eager to be released. As days turned into weeks, I found solace in my newfound freedom and the routine I had established. My job in administration, once a source of stress, now felt manageable, even enjoyable. But it was in the evenings, when I returned to my writing, that I felt truly alive. I wrote about everything, my feelings, my experiences, and even fictional stories that mirrored the journey I had been on. Each word was a step away from my past and a step towards rediscovering who I was. It wasn't long before I decided to take a leap of faith. I submitted some of my work to various publications and writing contests. To my surprise and delight, the response was overwhelmingly positive. My stories resonated with readers, and I began to receive offers for freelance writing jobs. One evening, as I was finishing up a piece, my phone rang. It was Jane, my colleague. "Anna, you won't believe it. Your story won first place in the local writing competition. They loved it." I was speechless. This was more than just a win. It was validation of my talent and my journey. As weeks turned into months, my life settled into a pleasant rhythm. I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. My relationship with Michael and his family became a distant memory, a chapter of my life that was closed and tucked away. But life has a way of bringing the past back, just when you think you've moved on. It was on a crisp autumn day that I received a call from Michael. His voice, once so familiar, now sounded like a distant echo from another life. "Anna, we need to talk." I hesitated for a moment, the old wounds still tender. But I was not the same woman he had left behind. I was stronger, more resilient. "All right, Michael, let's talk." The coffee shop was bustling with the late afternoon crowd, but the noise faded into the background as I saw Michael sitting at a corner table. He looked older, warier, a shadow of the man I once knew. "Anna, thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice tinged with a desperation I hadn't heard before. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. What did you want to talk about, Michael? He hesitated, fidgeting with his coffee cup. It's about the condo and everything, really. We're in trouble, Anna. I listened, my heart void of the sympathy I once would have felt. Michael spoke of financial woes, the high-rise dream turning into a nightmare of debts and disillusionment. Lily and Mrs. Thompson, once so demanding, were now facing the harsh reality of their situation. I thought my writing would save us, but... Michael's voice trailed off, his eyes not meeting mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had dismissed my concerns about money was now drowning in the very thing he had ignored. Michael, I'm sorry to hear that, but why tell me this? We're divorced. Your financial problems aren't mine anymore. He looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I was hoping maybe you could help us, just until I get back on my feet. The request was absurd, almost laughable. Help you? After everything that's happened? Michael leaned in, his voice low. You were always good with money, Anna, and you've always been kind-hearted. Kind-hearted. The term felt like a slap. I had been kind-hearted, and it had been taken for granted, exploited. Michael, I've moved on. I have my own life now, my own expenses. I can't help you. His face fell, the reality of my words sinking in. I see. I just thought. What did you think, Michael? That I'd come running back to fix the mess you've created? He didn't respond, the silence between us growing heavier by the second. Finally, I stood up. I wish you the best, Michael. I truly do, but your life is no longer my concern. As I walked away, leaving Michael in the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the final closure I needed. The last remnants of a life I no longer belonged to had been shed. The crisp autumn air was a refreshing contrast to the warmth of my apartment. As I sat at my desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminated the room. It had been a few months since my last encounter with Michael, and life had settled into a comforting rhythm of work and writing. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a call from Jane. Anna, you won't believe this. Your novel is being considered for a movie adaptation. I was stunned. My novel, born from the pain and turmoil of my past, had not only resonated with readers, but had also caught the attention of a film producer. It felt surreal, like a dream I was afraid to wake up from. Are you serious, Jane? That's incredible. Her excitement mirrored mine. I told you, Anna, you're a fantastic writer. This is just the beginning. As I ended the call, a profound sense of accomplishment washed over me. My journey, with all its hardships, had led me to this moment. In the weeks that followed, negotiations for the movie adaptation progressed rapidly. My novel, which detailed the struggles of a woman finding her strength amidst adversity, was going to be on the big screen. One evening, as I was reflecting on these developments, a news alert popped up on my phone. It was about Michael. Curiosity piqued. I clicked on the link. The article detailed Michael's latest misfortune. His attempts at writing had finally come to a futile end. Publishers had lost interest, citing his lack of originality and poor sales. To add to his woes, his high-rise dream had crumbled. Unable to keep up with the rent and mounting debts, he and his family had been forced to move out. I read the article with a mix of emotions. There was no joy in seeing someone's life unravel, but there was a sense of poetic justice. Michael and his family, who had once looked down on me, were now facing the consequences of their actions and choices. As I turned off my phone, I realized that this was the true essence of karma. It wasn't about revenge or seeing others suffer. It was about the natural balance of life where actions and choices inevitably shaped one's destiny. I turned back to my writing, the words flowing freely. My experiences had taught me that strength comes from within, and that resilience is born from adversity. And now I was sharing those lessons with the world. My past with Michael and his family was a closed chapter, but it had given me the greatest gift, the realization of my own potential and the courage to pursue my dreams. As the moon cast a gentle light through my window, I smiled to myself. Life was unpredictable, filled with ups and downs, but I was ready for whatever came next. I had found my voice, my purpose, and no one could take that away from me.
Living alone in the house I had shared with my late husband, I found solace in the routine of household chores that kept me grounded. My name's Helen. a 65-year-old retiree who had recently hung up her office attire for the last time, looking forward to a well-deserved break after decades of the 9-to-5 grind. The house, a large 2-story building with rooms echoing memories of family gatherings, required constant upkeep. But I took pride in keeping every corner spotless and every garden plant thriving. My life, though quiet, was punctuated by visits from my 2 children. My eldest, a daughter named Anna, led a busy life with her husband, and they remained childless by choice, focusing on their careers. My youngest, David, however, had given me 3 wonderful grandchildren aged between 5 and 12, who brought a whirlwind of energy into my tranquil existence whenever they visited. One crisp afternoon, as I was dusting the living room filled with photos of happier times, an unexpected knock startled me. I wasn't used to surprise visitors, especially since my circle had grown smaller over the years. Opening the door, I was met with the sight of David, his wife Carol, and their kids, their faces a mix of excitement and exhaustion. "David, what a surprise! Why didn't you give me a heads up?" I'd asked, my voice tinged with a mix of joy and dismay. David shrugged, a nonchalant gesture that didn't sit well with me. "Mom, you're my mother. I figured we could just pop by." His words stung more than I expected. The open-door policy I'd always maintained for family now felt like it was being taken for granted. My thoughts were soon drowned out by the chorus of "We're hungry, Grandma," from the grandkids, who were already making their way to the kitchen, a space where I'd spent countless hours preparing family meals. "Let me get you all something to eat then," I said, masking my feelings of disappointment with a smile. Turning to Carol, I added, "Could you lend a hand with dinner?" Carol, who had made herself comfortable on the living room sofa, barely glanced my way as she responded, "Oh, I don't think so. I'm here on a visit after all." The air seemed to freeze around us. David, witnessing the exchange, chose silence, a decision that spoke volumes. Frustration boiled within me, but the eager faces of my grandchildren looking up at me cooled my rising temper. "All right, no worries. I'll handle it," I conceded, turning back to the kitchen, a battlefield where I was both general and foot soldier. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the kitchen, I found myself embroiled in the laborious task of cooking dinner for 6. The process was both a physical and emotional drain, each chop and stir a reminder of the unexpected burden that had fallen upon me. Yet the thought of my grandchildren's smiles propelled me forward, their well-being my top priority in the midst of this family upheaval. As we gathered around the dinner table, the fruits of my efforts laid out for all to see, the children's eyes sparkled with genuine gratitude. "This is awesome, Grandma. Thank you," they chorused, their innocent enthusiasm a balm to my weary heart. Carol, however, remained unimpressed as she picked at her food with a look of distaste. She finally let out a dismissive sigh. "Honestly, Helen, I've never understood how anyone likes your cooking," she remarked, her words sharp and cutting. The room fell silent, the children's joyful chatter coming to an abrupt halt. I glanced at David, hoping for some semblance of support, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on his plate. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, a tangible reminder of the growing divide between us. Once the children were put to bed, their laughter and footsteps fading into the quiet of the night, I knew it was time to address the elephant in the room. "David, Carol, we need to talk about how long you're planning to stay," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. David met my gaze, his expression one of resignation. "A few months, Mom. I lost my job and we can't afford our own place right now," he admitted, the words heavy with a mixture of shame and defiance. The news struck me like a physical blow, the implications of their extended stay sending waves of panic through me. Yet despite my own fears, my first instinct was to help. "I might be able to speak to my old boss. He's always looking for reliable people," I offered, clinging to the hope that I could alleviate some of our shared burden. David's response was immediate and sharp. "No, Mom, I'll find something on my own," he said, his pride evident in his tone. Then I turned to my daughter-in-law with a mute question. Carol's laughter cut through the tense atmosphere, her disdain palpable. "Work? No way. I'll be staying home with the kids. It's enough of a job as it is, she declared, her words dripping with entitlement. The conversation left me reeling, the disparity in our perspectives clearer than ever. As I lay in bed that night, the house quiet around me, I couldn't help but feel trapped in a situation with no easy way out. My desire to support my family was clashing with the growing realization that my generosity was being exploited, and I was left wondering how I could possibly navigate the months ahead without losing myself in the process. Waking up to a house full of people had become my new normal. The once quiet mornings were now filled with the sounds of my grandchildren getting ready for the day, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the silence I had grown accustomed to in retirement, yet as much as I cherished these moments with them, the reality of my situation weighed heavily on me. The daily routine had become a relentless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and trying to maintain some semblance of order. Carol seemed oblivious to the chaos, her days spent scrolling through her phone or watching TV, while David disappeared each morning with a mumbled looking for work, only to return in the evening no more hopeful than the day before. For one particularly taxing afternoon, as I was elbow-deep in dishwater after preparing lunch, I couldn't help but voice my frustration. "Carol, could you possibly help with the dishes?" "I've been on my feet all day," I asked, hoping for even a small gesture of assistance. Carol looked up from her phone, her expression one of mild annoyance. "Really, Helen? I'm sure you've got this. It's not like you have anything else to do," she replied, her voice dripping with disdain before turning her attention back to her screen. The dismissal stung, and for a moment I stood there with the soapy water and the pile of dishes in front of me blurring into a symbol of my growing resentment. It was clear I was alone in my efforts to keep the household running smoothly. David's return that evening did little to lift the atmosphere. As we sat down to a quiet dinner, the tension was palpable. "David, have you had any luck with the job hunt?" I ventured, hoping for some positive news. He shook his head, his frustration mirrored in his tight expression. "Nothing yet, Mom, but I'll keep trying," he said, a note of defeat in his voice that tugged at my heartstrings. Despite the day's trials, I sighed, the weight of their situation settling over me like a heavy blanket. "Well, what do you expect us to do, Helen? It's not like jobs are just falling out of the sky," Carol snapped, her patience clearly worn thin. I hurriedly turned the conversation to the children's need for stability and routine. "I understand it's tough, but we need to think about what's best for the kids. They need structure, especially with school starting soon," I replied, my concern for my grandchildren's well-being at the forefront of my mind. But it didn't seem to bother David and Carol much. It was well past midnight, and sleep eluded me once again. My thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning around the endless cycle of chores and the mounting tension between Carol and me. Deciding a glass of water might calm my restless mind. I quietly made my way down the hallway towards the kitchen. As I passed the living room, a faint murmur of voices stopped me in my tracks. David and Carol were up, their low conversation punctuating the stillness of the night. Curiosity piqued, I paused, straining to listen without making my presence known. "I'm telling you, Carol, we need to figure out a way to stay here permanently. Mom's got this big house all to herself. It's wasted on her." David's voice was a conspiratorial whisper, a tone I hardly recognized in my son. Carol's laugh, cold and uncalculating, sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, please, like she needs all the space. We're doing her a favor by staying. Plus, think of all the money we'll save." My heart pounded in my chest, their words slicing through me like a knife. The audacity of their plan, the blatant disregard for my feelings and my home was staggering. "And the savings, Carol. Mom must have a decent stash tucked away. It's not like she's using it. We could really use that cash," David continued, his voice greedy. A stranger to the son I thought I knew. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son plotting to take advantage of me, to lay claim to the home I had built with my late husband, and even eyeing my modest savings as if it were his due. Steeling myself, I stepped into the living room, flicking on the light. The look of shock on their faces was almost satisfying, but the pain of their betrayal was too deep. "What on earth are you two thinking?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. David and Carol scrambled to their feet, the guilt evident in their expressions. Mom, it's not what it sounds like. We were just. David began, but I cut him off. No, I heard enough. Planning to take over my home. Eyeing my savings like vultures. Is this why you really came here? My words were laced with disbelief and hurt. Carol, ever defiant, tried to justify their conversation. Helen, you're overreacting. We're family. We should be helping each other out. You have this big house and we're struggling. What's so wrong about thinking of the future? The future? By plotting behind my back? By considering my hard-earned savings as your bailout? I retorted, the anger rising in me. The conversation spiraled into a heated exchange, with accusations and denials flying back and forth. But the truth was clear. My son and his wife saw my home, my life's work, not as a sanctuary, but as a resource to be exploited. Over a breakfast that no one seemed to have an appetite for, I broached the subject that had been on my mind since that fateful night. David, Carol, we need to talk about your plans, I started, my voice more steady than I felt. What about them, Mom? He asked, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. It's clear to me that staying here isn't working for any of us. It's straining our relationship, and frankly, I can't keep living like this, I said, laying my cards on the table. Carol snorted, her disdain barely concealed. So what? You're kicking us out. I sighed, the weight of the decision heavy on my heart. I'm offering a solution. I'm willing to give you a sum of money, $5,000. It should be enough for you to rent a place for a couple of months and give David a chance to find a job, I proposed, my voice firm. David's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, he seemed to consider my offer seriously. Mom, that's a lot of money, are you sure? He asked, a glimmer of the sun I knew peeking through his recent attitude. Yes, I'm sure. It's for the best. I want you to have a fresh start, but not at the cost of our family's bond, I replied, hoping my words would get through to him. Carol, however, laughed mockingly. Babysitting money. How generous, she sneered, her words dripping with sarcasm. I ignored Carol's jab, focusing on David. Think of it as a stepping stone. I know you're capable of turning things around. This is just to help you get on your feet. I encouraged, trying to instill a sense of hope and independence in him. David nodded slowly, his expression softening. All right, Mom, we'll take the offer. It's more than fair, and I appreciate it. He conceded, a rare moment of humility in his recent behavior. Carol seemed about to protest but held her tongue, perhaps realizing that this was their best option under the circumstances. The day they left for the airport, the house felt eerily quiet. I busied myself with cleaning, trying to erase the traces of their stay, but the silence was a stark reminder of the void their absence left. It was only 3 hours later when my phone rang with a call from my eldest granddaughter, Diana, that the silence was broken. Grandma, Mom and Dad left us at the airport and flew to Hawaii, she said, her voice trembling, confusion and fear evident in her tone. My heart stopped. The desperation of the solution I had offered had turned into a nightmare I hadn't anticipated. They had taken the money meant to rebuild their lives and abandoned their children to escape to the resort. As I rushed to the airport and called the police, a flurry of emotions engulfed me. Anger, disbelief, but above all, a fierce determination to protect my grandchildren from any further harm caused by their parents' selfish actions. The ride back home was filled with a heavy silence, punctuated only by their occasional sniffles. My heart ached for them, their confusion and sadness palpable in the cramped space of the taxi. Once we arrived home, I ushered them inside, settling them on the couch with blankets and hot cocoa, a small attempt to provide comfort in the midst of the chaos their parents had wrought. Grandma, why did Mom and Dad leave us? Lily, the youngest, asked, her big eyes searching mine for an explanation I was struggling to formulate. I sighed, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. Sometimes adults make very bad decisions, sweetheart. But I want you to know you're safe here with me always, I said, my words feeling inadequate, but the sincerity behind them seeming to offer a modicum of comfort. Jack, more perceptive of the trio, looked at me with a maturity beyond his years. "Are they coming back for us?" he asked, his voice steady but his concern evident. I met his gaze, my resolve firming. "For now, let's focus on being together. We'll figure things out one step at a time," I replied, not wanting to burden them with the uncertainty of their parents' actions. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, an effort to distract them from their worries. We talked about school, their friends, and plans for the weekend, anything to bring back a semblance of normalcy. The next morning, I was determined to take action. I reached out to a family lawyer, explaining the situation and seeking advice on how to protect my grandchildren. The lawyer was sympathetic, offering guidance on the steps we could take to ensure their well-being. I also made a call to my daughter Anna. Despite the early hour, she answered on the first ring, concern immediately evident in her voice. "Mom, what's wrong?" Anna asked, her voice tight with worry. "It's about David, Carol, and the kids." I began, the story pouring out of me, the disbelief, the anger, and the fear for what lay ahead. Anna listened in stunned silence, her occasional gasps a testament to the shock she shared. "This is unbelievable. How could they do something like this?" Anna's voice was tight with anger. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll be there as soon as I can. We'll figure this out together." Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves, the promise of support a beacon of hope in the turmoil. "Thank you, darling. I don't know how we got here," I admitted, the weariness seeping into my bones. "We'll get through this, Mom. We're a family, and we stick together," Anna assured me, her determination echoing my own. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, meetings with lawyers, and long conversations with Anna about the future. The children, despite the upheaval, began to settle into a routine, their resilience in the face of adversity a constant source of amazement and pride. The calm that had settled over the house with the children finding their routine was abruptly shattered 2 weeks later. The doorbell rang one sunny afternoon, an innocuous sound that now filled me with a sense of dread. I hesitated before opening the door, the memories of the last unexpected visit still fresh in my mind. There stood David and Carol, tanned and looking remarkably relaxed. "Mom, we're back," David exclaimed, stepping inside as if nothing had happened, Carol trailing behind him with a smug smile on her face. I stood there stunned, unable to fully process their return or the casual manner in which they announced it. "Back after what you've done." My voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. David shrugged, a gesture that infuriated me even more. "Yeah, we needed a break, but we're here now." "Where are the kids?" The audacity of his question, the expectation that everything would just go back to normal, pushed me to the edge. "You left your children at the airport, David. You abandoned them to go on a vacation." I couldn't keep the accusation out of my voice, nor did I want to. Carol rolled her eyes, dismissing my outrage. "Oh, please, Helen, they were fine. We knew you'd pick them up. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," I echoed, my voice rising. "You neglected your responsibilities as parents. You left them scared and alone. That's the big deal." David seemed to sense the seriousness of the situation for the first time, his casual demeanor slipping. "Mom, we thought." "You thought wrong." I cut him off, my decision clear in my mind. I can't let you just walk back into their lives as if nothing happened. Before they could respond, I made my way to the phone in the living room, dialing the number with a trembling hand. The police have been involved once. They would need to be involved again. "What are you doing?" Carol asked, her tone shifting from dismissive to alarmed. "I'm calling the police," I stated plainly, my finger pressing the call button. "You need to understand the seriousness of your actions." "Mom, wait, let's talk about this," David tried to protest, his voice a mix of confusion and fear. "There's nothing to talk about. You've made your choices. Now you need to face the consequences," I replied, the operator answering on the other end as I explained the situation to the police. David and Carol exchanged panicked glances, Finally, realizing the gravity of their actions, they attempted to plead their case, to argue that they were the children's parents and had every right to take them back. But it was too late. The police arrived shortly, and the conversation that ensued was short and to the point. David and Carol were taken into custody for abandoning their children, their protests falling on deaf ears. After they were gone, I sat down, the adrenaline fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Anna arrived later that day, her support unwavering as we discussed what would come next. The children, when told of their parents' return and subsequent departure, were surprisingly stoic, a testament to their resilience and perhaps a reflection of their own understanding of their parents' failings. The final chapter of this tumultuous period in our lives began with a court ruling that was as harsh as it was justified. My son David and his wife, Carol, were stripped of their parental rights due to their blatant neglect and improper performance of their duties as parents. The judge didn't mince words, calling their act of leaving the kids at the airport not just irresponsible but criminal. They now faced the very real possibility of serving time, a consequence of their actions that seemed to finally bring home the gravity of their neglect. As I sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge lay out the case against David and Carol, a part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. My son, the boy I raised, facing a sentence for abandoning his own children. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but one that was necessary for the safety and well-being of my grandchildren. With David and Carol's parental rights terminated, the path was clear for Anna and her husband Jan to step in. They had been a constant source of support through this ordeal, and their willingness to adopt the children was a silver lining in an otherwise dark cloud. "Mom, it's official. We're starting the adoption process," Anna told me one evening, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I hope we're doing the right thing." "You are," I assured her, my heart full of gratitude for her and John's generosity. "You're giving those kids a chance at a stable, loving home. That's more than David and Carol ever did." Anna nodded, her determination clear. "We're going to make sure they never feel abandoned again. They're going to be part of our family, officially." The children, for their part, were slowly adjusting to the idea. The promise of a permanent home with Anna and Jan brought smiles to their faces, smiles that had been too rare in recent months. The day the adoption was finalized felt like a new beginning. We celebrated as a family, a unit strengthened by the trials we faced and overcome together. The joy in the children's eyes as they hugged Anna and Jan, now their official parents, was a balm to my soul. Sitting in my quiet living room later that night, I reflected on the journey we'd all undertaken. It had been fraught with hard-taken challenges, but it had also brought us closer together. The children were safe and loved, their futures bright with possibility. And while the pain of David and Carol's betrayal lingered, the knowledge that justice had been served and that the kids were in good hands allowed me to look forward with hope. I'm Daisy, an 18-year-old university student from Florida. My parents divorced when I was 12, and I've resided with my mom ever since. Last year, my father succumbed to cancer, which was profoundly challenging for me because we were really close. He left me a significant amount of money in his will, but I could only access it once I turned 18. This year, I finally turned 18, and something really crazy happened to me. To be honest, I still can't believe how everything turned out. One day, my stepdad Arlo, who's in his mid-40s and has been married to my mom for 5 years, called me into his room. We've never had the best relationship, but I've tried to be civil with him. However, he hasn't always been nice to me. Anyway, he said, "Hey Daisy, I need to talk to you about something important." I asked him what it was, and he brought up the money my dad left me. He said that I should give it to my stepbrother David because he needed it for his college education. He wanted to go to university just like me, and Arlo thought I should hand over the inheritance money to him. I was shocked by what I heard. I couldn't believe that Arlo was asking me to give away my own money. I told him, "I don't think I can do that, Arlo. This money was left to me by my dad. What if I need it in the future?" Arlo didn't agree with me and said, "Don't be silly. You don't need that money, and even if you do, David needs it more." I firmly replied, "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." Arlo got angry and warned me, "Daisy, don't push me." I told him calmly, "There's no need to get angry. I answered your question honestly. Saying no isn't meant to disrespect you. It's about setting boundaries. I'm standing my ground. And if you're getting mad because I said no, you need to think about your attitude, Arlo. Don't forget, you're a guest in this house too, so let's be civil." "Well, I don't think that's going to happen. Goodbye," I said before he could say anything else. Arlo's behavior didn't surprise me at all given his past actions. I knew he'd eventually ask me for the money. You might be wondering where my mom was during all of this. Well, that's another story. My mom didn't seem to see Arlo's flaws. She stood by him no matter what, almost like she was under a spell. She loved me, but I didn't want to ruin her view of him, so I tried to get along with Arlo for her sake. It's strange how, even though I was one of the youngest in the house, I often had to act the most mature. My mom, Rose, was out of town at the time, which is why she wasn't here. If she were, she'd have been furious. That's why Arlo felt like he could boss me around. But little did he know I was onto his sneaky plans. Arlo followed me out of the room, scolding me and calling me a bad sister because I didn't want to give money to David, which wasn't true. I do want to help David stop being such a burden. When people say, like father, like son, they might be talking about David and Arlo. These two troublemakers are like Pinky and the Brain. You can decide who's who based on what happened next. Hey, don't walk away while I'm talking. You need to listen and do what's right, Arlo. Can you give me a good reason for that? Well, it's what's going on with you two. Your arguing woke me up, David. Tell Daisy about what we talked about earlier. Sure, what was it again? Oh, right, the inheritance money. Yeah, Daisy, Dad, and I were talking, and we demand this money because of that important thing we talked about. You mean the business, right? What business? You said this money was for my university tuition, Arlo. Yeah, that's because that's what it's for, right, David? Yes, I completely forgot. I just woke up, you know. Yes, it's for university. I have an interest in attending university, and I demand the money for myself. Thanks. Well, that's a cute attempt, but not cute enough. The answer is no. Why not, Daisy? He knows what he wants. This wasn't up for discussion. We're getting that money. We'll see about that. The rest of the evening was filled with tension. While Arlo was known for his silly pranks and attempts to test my patience, this new effort to annoy me was quite unusual. I met a really immature and selfish person. This situation was pretty big, but I didn't want to tell my mom about it yet. I wanted to keep dealing with them, especially after I found out this. Daisy, stop playing around. You need to be a grown-up and do the right thing. Huh. And the right thing is giving away my money. Are you okay, Arlo? Just wait until I tell Mom. Don't tell Rose anything. Why not? She's my mom. She deserves to know how I'm being treated. You think she cares? Listen, I'm just trying to help you. If you bring this up to her, she'll get upset at you for wasting her time and being selfish. Well, Arlo, that's a risk I'm willing to take. I'm warning you, don't tell your mother. His angry tone surprised me. I had never seen him so worked up, especially over something like this. Something was going on, especially with that business idea David let slip. They think I'm not smart enough to catch on, and Arlo is acting so strongly against me talking to my mom about it. I talked to my mom as soon as I could. Hey, Mom, how are you doing? I'm good, baby. How about you? Not very well, Mom. Something's off with Arlo and David, especially Arlo. He's acting weirder than usual. Oh, Daisy, don't be paranoid. I know you don't really like him, but he's not weird. Mom, he asked me for the inheritance money. What, really? Actually, he demanded to get the money, both him and David. That's not true. He wouldn't do that. I know you love him, Mom, for whatever reason, but this is true. He said it's for David's education. but I think something fishy is going on. He even got pretty aggressive when I told him I'd tell you what he said to me. I don't know, baby. I just feel like I need more proof. Don't worry, I'll get all the proof. Just wait and see. Even though my mom wasn't ready to fully believe me yet, I kept telling you that man put a spell on her. I was still determined to figure out this strange behavior. Late at night, I used the family computer and found something shocking. Luckily, it seemed Arlo forgot to log out of his email. That was a big mistake. I saw something very concerning. Arlo had been sending emails to a lady named Bella. These emails weren't nice at all. It looked like he was having an affair. I took notes on what I found. But the next thing I found was even crazier. The emails talked about Arlo divorcing my mom and running away with her. He said they get a lot of money soon for some business, but from what I read, it seemed like a shady business. Arlo isn't dumb enough to put illegal stuff in his emails, but he's dumb enough to have an affair and forget to log out. I knew I needed to gather more info, and I thought I could maybe get something out of David. So the next day, I talked to David with my phone recording our conversation. Hey, David. Hello, Daisy. You seem happy today. Why not? It's a beautiful day. I have some questions for you. I've been thinking about what you and Arlo said, and I'm thinking about giving you the money. Really? That's great. I'll let him know. Not so fast. Before I give you this money, it is for your college, right? Oh yeah, right. My college tuition. Yes, right. Anyways, I need to be sure you're serious about getting this money. Yes, I'm very serious. Are you sure? And Bella. Is she serious? Bella? Who's Bella? Oh, she's, a student advisor for the college. David and I were scared. We didn't know Arlo had come into the room. I don't appreciate you interrogating my son. I wasn't doing that. I was just asking how my money would be used. Well, once you give someone money, it's not yours anymore, so it's not your business. Is that any way to speak to someone who's thinking of giving you money? You're not thinking, you're giving me that money. If you don't, I'll kick you out. I was shocked, and it seemed like David was too. Dad, this wasn't part of. Shut up. I'm the parent and I make the rules. If you don't give me that inheritance money, you can leave. I decided not to say anything. Little did Arlo know, I was still recording this conversation. I had caught him in the act. I walked out of the room, shooting Arlo an angry look, and locked myself in my room. I started collecting all the evidence I could find against him. It felt like those detectives on TV who gather clues and put them up on their walls. I had voice recordings and screenshots of Arlo's conversations with Bella. I prepared myself for the upcoming storm. After I had everything, I called my mom. Hello, Mom. Hey, love. How are you? Mom, are you sitting down? Why? What's wrong? I'm afraid. I have some really bad news to share, and you won't like it. I began telling my mom everything I had discovered. She kept denying it until I made her listen to the audio recording I had made earlier. At that point, she started to crumble. Why would he say those things to you? Why would he do that to me? Why would he be so cruel? Because he's a bad man. I'm sorry to say it, but you married a monster. This is just terrible. I can't believe I left you alone with those two sickos. Absolutely not. I'm coming home right now. You stay where you are. Have you locked your door? Yes, ma'am. I'm going to ruin that man and make sure he never shows his face in public again. When I'm done with him, he'll wish he never married me. That's the spirit, Mom. Now, hurry up and get home. We need to make a plan. My mom arrived several hours later and came straight to my room. We hugged and cried for what felt like hours. I could tell that this news was tough to hear, but I was glad she was in the angry stage because it motivated her to take action. We talked for hours, and by the end, we had a plan. Several days passed, and Arlo couldn't figure out why my mom had come home early from her work trip and why she was ignoring him. He acted very happy, almost too happy, to convince her of his innocence. However, she saw through his act and was ready to kick him out. My mom decided to hire a private investigator after I showed her the suspicious messages about his supposed business. She also felt strongly that the money wasn't going to be used for legal purposes. This made her furious because she couldn't understand how a parent could be so cruel and scheming. She knew we couldn't handle this situation on our own. The private investigator shared the findings with my mom, who then told me I'm speechless. What did the investigator find? Well, it turns out he's planning to use a laundromat for money laundering. It's an old trick. Wow, that's not all, is it? No, it's not. This woman, Bella, whom he's cheating on me with, has a criminal record for drug-related activities. She's been arrested multiple times for conspiracy to sell illegal substances. So, it wouldn't be surprising if their business involves drugs too. That's unbelievable. I would have never expected this. I feel like a veil has been lifted from my eyes. Now I can see that the man I married isn't a man at all, but a sick and twisted person. When are we going to confront him, Mom? Right now. Follow my lead. Wait, let me get my camera. We went to the living room and found David and Arlo discussing their shady business. And then we'll have to use this as a cover for our business. It's all going to be hidden. Just act like you don't know and serve the customers, okay? But what about? Oh, hey, everyone. We're just finalizing stuff for David's college application. Cut the act, Arlo. The game is up. We know everything. What do you mean? Your innocent act won't work anymore. Smile for the camera. Get that out of my face, you spoiled brat. I mean, Daisy, we know everything, Arlo. Do you know how many years you'd spend in jail for planning these crimes? I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe we should call Bella and see what she has to say, huh? You two think you know everything. Bella is just a friend. Well, the explicit photos suggest otherwise. Who even uses emails to cheat nowadays? It's so dumb. You two went through my things. How dare you? No, Arlo, how dare you? How dare you threaten my daughter multiple times to give you money that doesn't belong to you? How dare you threaten to kick her out of my house? Are you sick in the head? How dare you put your son in your foolish schemes, endangering him? And how dare you plan to use this money for illegal activities? Now you've got nothing to say, huh? We know everything, and we're going to take you down. Get that camera out of my face. Arlo tried to lunge at me, but I moved too quickly. His aggressive behavior was scary. You want to attack my daughter? It's like you want to go to prison. You're crazy. Do you think you know anything? You know nothing. Yeah, well, tell that to the police, who should be here any second now. Police? Yes, the police. Your behavior today makes me not want to call the cops, especially with how you're acting. At that moment, we heard police sirens approaching our neighborhood. I had never seen Arlo look this way before. He was always smirking like he was smarter than everyone else. But when he heard those sirens, it was like all the color drained from his face. He looked terrified. Please, Rose, you don't have to do this. I could explain everything. Save it for the judge, you cockroach. You disgust me. And my David, don't think you're off the hook for this. Both of you are getting arrested. That should teach you a lesson about mistreating my daughter and me. I know you're a kid, but you're old enough to know better. And for that, you need to be punished. Yes, Mom. Come on, Jasmine, don't you think all of this is a bit too much? On the contrary, it's not enough. How's our live stream, Daisy? We've got over 3,000 people watching the live stream. This is going to be big. Oh, and in case it wasn't clear, I want a divorce. That's right, folks. Over 3,000 people witnessed the whole mess, and surely enough, the news made it to local newspapers and tabloids. It was crazy to be in the middle of all this with my sick ex-stepfather and his son, but it was also satisfying to see his downfall. He lost his job, his friends, and even some family members who don't want to speak with him anymore. He's facing charges for all these schemes, and if the judge sees fit, he could spend up to 20 years behind bars just for this. The police also found Bella, who had been in hiding when all of this was blowing up. She's facing the same charges. Life was good on our side, though. My mom and I grew closer due to this situation. On weekends, we'd often relax on the patio, drinks in hand, and laugh at how foolish and evil Arlo was. Good riddance. Good rid indeed. Henceforth, my brother and his wife declared, "We'll manage the household independently, so find another place to live." My mother, aligning herself with their decision, treated me as an impediment. Do they comprehend who has been footing the bills for the house? I never anticipated such disrespect. In the recesses of my mind, I resolved to take certain actions. I go by the name Carrie, a 30-year-old woman. Currently, I reside in my parents' home. After returning from college, initially, I ventured into the corporate world to forge my path. But the challenges overwhelmed me, prompting my return home. While initially navigating unemployment, I explored work-from-home opportunities. Armed with a scientific background, I embarked on a freelance engineering career, commencing with modest projects. The income was meager, yet the experience of working independently was profoundly meaningful. In stark contrast to conventional employment, I could generate ample income without excessive social interaction. As my confidence grew, so did my workload and earnings. Within a year, my income rivaled that of a regular corporate employee. However, the predicament lay in my parents' understanding, especially my mother's reluctance to embrace my work-from-home lifestyle. My father grasped my explanation, but my mother, rooted in traditional beliefs, harbored apprehensions about what she couldn't fathom. Despite my earnest attempts to elucidate, my mother persisted with questions like, "How long do you plan on staying home?" and insinuations about the legitimacy of my online work. Despite presenting evidence of client emails and salary statements, my mother remained unconvinced. She suspected it to be some shady business or involvement in a dubious religion. Despite the consistent payments and the legitimacy of my job, despite my detailed explanations, my mother remained steadfast in her skepticism. She continually expressed concerns about the possibility of relying on unemployment benefits, emphasizing their impermanence. Although I had contemplated living independently, my savings were not yet sufficient. Around that time, my father's health took a toll with deteriorating legs and back, necessitating nursing care. Facing an early retirement and sudden income loss, my father assured me that his pension would suffice. However, acknowledging my mother's spending habits, I questioned his ability to manage. His face wore the fatigue of anxiety about the uncertain future. My father had supported me through college and even when I returned home due to mental health challenges. The idea of leaving him alone and continuing to live independently troubled me. My mother, too, grappled with confusion over my father's sudden condition. Contemplating the situation, I felt a sense of responsibility and a desire to give back. Reassuring my father, I pledged to support the family from that point onward. He expressed surprise, doubting my income's adequacy, but I confidently showed him my stable financial situation. Grasping the reality, my father, who had always understood my circumstances, was taken aback by my newfound stability. Encouraged by his understanding, I offered to help with household expenses, medical bills, and other financial obligations. Each month, I transferred a certain amount to my father's bank account, shouldering a significant part of the financial burden. As my mother had been using my father's credit card, I created a new main card and provided her with a supplementary card. My father, mindful of saving money, urged my mother to follow suit. In response, my mother questioned whether I should be asked to leave the house. I pointed out my financial contributions and emphasized that it would be more challenging without my support. Skeptical, my mother remained unconvinced and suspicious of my assistance. It took my father's persuasion to finally gain her agreement, allowing me to continue living with them. Continuing my work and household responsibilities, I found my mother increasingly taking my assistance for granted. Her strictness intensified with constant remarks about the speed of my chores. "Can't you finish your chores faster?" she would complain. I explained the challenge of multitasking while working, but she dismissed my concerns. The strain on my relationship with her became apparent, and it seemed irreparable. In contrast, my father, understanding my efforts, provided much-needed support. Despite this strained dynamic, we persevered in this manner for a year. After a year, my father's health took a sudden downturn, requiring hospitalization. Visiting him daily, I shared moments of concern and reassurance. Aware of the strain on me, my father expressed gratitude, acknowledging the difficulties in my relationship with my mother. As my father grappled with health issues, the already strained relationship between my mother and me deteriorated further. Despite feeling suffocated at times, I remained committed to supporting my family. Recollections of my mother's past efforts, especially during my student days, kept me steadfast in this commitment. However, a significant shift occurred when my mother welcomed my brother Kevin and his wife Mary. Their unexpected arrival brought an abrupt change to my living situation. My brother explained their decision, stating they would be living in the house from now on to ease the burden on me. I was taken aback, and my mother seemed to avoid eye contact. While my brother and his wife claimed their intention was to support me, a hidden meaning lingered in their words. My mother, expressing gratitude, subtly hinted at my need to contribute more to the household. Despite the surprise, I learned that my brother, a graduate of a prestigious college, had joined a reputable company. The unexpected turn in events left me questioning the true motives behind my brother and his wife's presence in our home. Certainly, he must have been earning a substantial salary, but I too was diligently pursuing my own endeavors. I wonder if they could manage without my contributions. Transitioning into a new life at home with my brother and his wife proved to be more demanding than anticipated. "Wake up, Perry, make breakfast," my brother's wife hollered, banging on my door. Fully awake and already engrossed in my work as a morning person, I explained that I was already up and working. Despite my work commitments, they insisted that I prepare breakfast. "Get on with it and get breakfast ready," she demanded. I reluctantly forced myself to assist, considering our family's usual morning freedom. Typically, we enjoyed meals at our own pace, especially when my mother and brother's wife were present. I presumed it was customary for the wife to prepare breakfast for her husband. However, my sister-in-law insisted on cooperation, and I reluctantly joined them in the kitchen. Despite my efforts, their dissatisfaction was evident. "Is this what you prepared for breakfast?" "This isn't enough," they complained. I had meticulously crafted a breakfast plate featuring soft scrambled eggs, a refreshing lettuce salad, fresh buttered toast, and a succulent sausage, thinking it would be well received. However, it seemed I had missed something. "You don't have to eat it," I retorted, but their surprise was palpable. Their reaction turned confrontational, questioning my attitude and who I thought I was. My brother, often condescending, mocked me, likely influenced by our mother. Despite explaining my work commitments, they dismissed it. "What kind of work is that? Are you crazy?" they exclaimed. Frustrated by their lack of understanding and the impact on my work, I packed my laptop, ignored their protests, and left the house. As I departed, my brother's voice echoed in the background, demanding to know where I was going. Ignoring the question, I proceeded to my father's hospital room. Hurrying in, his surprised gaze met mine. "Carrie, what's wrong?" "You seem flustered," he observed. I recounted the recent incident, and my father, wearing a surprised expression, responded, "I didn't know they were. I'm sorry, Carrie. Don't worry about it. You can choose your own way of life." Feeling lost, I expressed concern that my mother might feel more comfortable if my brother Kevin were at home. However, my father reassured me, "You don't need to be in a place where you don't feel comfortable. All I want is for you to live happily. Live your life the way you want to live." Encouraged by my father's words, I decided to leave home. Upon returning that evening, I encountered a tense scene resembling a movie. The serious faces of my mother, brother, and sister-in-law greeted me. My brother accused me of not being at work, forcing him to take the day off. Inwardly, I questioned the responsibility of easily taking time off work. Their voices escalated, culminating in my brother demanding, "Get out of here. From now on, the three of us will live together. If you don't want to stay, please leave. We don't need an overbearing presence like you to support us." It was a shocking statement, and I replied in surprise. Ignoring my protests, my brother and his wife insisted on my departure, declaring that I was no longer needed. In the absence of our father, my mother, aligning with their sentiments, regarded me as a hindrance. The frustration intensified as they dismissed my involvement in the family's finances and prioritized their own concerns. Enraged by their insensitivity, I devised a plan. Initially, I transferred the money linked to the credit card my mother used daily to another account under my management. This subtle move aimed to surprise my mother when she could no longer access her credit card. I initiated a money transfer from my father's account, a crucial pillar supporting the family's financial stability. However, I ensured that only my father's medical expenses could be withdrawn from this separate account, unbeknownst to my mother. Consequently, a significant financial burden now rested on my brother and his wife. Though unaware of the intricate details of my brother's income, I was certain that he would feel the weight more than ever. After completing the necessary formalities, I gathered my belongings and declared my departure, saying, "I'm leaving this place." To my surprise, my mother, brother, and sister-in-law, who had been relentlessly harassing me, looked taken aback. Their astonishment revealed that they hadn't anticipated my decisive action. Although from the expressions on their faces, it seemed they were secretly enjoying the moment. As I announced my departure, they belittled me, expressing their relief. "You're finally leaving. We've never dealt with such a troublesome person. You're not coming back, are you?" In response, I asserted, "Of course not. Don't contact me." They smiled as I left the house, but I couldn't help but wonder what they would think after I had left. Embarking on a new life in a tranquil environment, I found solace and the freedom to enjoy my own time. Refreshed and focused, I immersed myself in my work. However, as expected, a call from my brother disrupted the peace. "I told you not to contact me. What's wrong?" I questioned. His voice conveyed surprise and urgency as he inquired about my involvement in the family's financial transactions. Confirming my role, I reminded him that I had mentioned my work several times, but neither he nor our mother had believed me. Expressing confusion, he admitted, "Well, Mom said a lot of things, and I was a little confused." Refusing to acknowledge that it wasn't my fault, he revealed a financial predicament. With my absence, they struggled to manage expenses, and my mother's spending had exacerbated the situation. Though sympathetic, I asserted, "I was able to support you in many ways because I was at home. I'm not there anymore, so you have to handle it, Carrie." I found myself in an unexpected situation when my brother urgently requested assistance in transferring money to his bank account. Perplexed, I asked if he was joking, given that he worked for a sizable company. However, to my surprise, my brother confessed that he had been fired from his job due to a significant mistake. His revelation left me speechless, and I realized that he might have returned to our parents' house assuming there was enough money available. Perhaps he relied on the notion of a stable pension following our father's retirement. Wanting to enlighten my brother about my financial contributions to the household, I found amusement in the thought of his astonishment upon learning the truth. His wife and my mother joined the plea for financial aid, claiming they were on the verge of running out of savings. My mother even revealed that my father refused to contribute to household finances any longer. In response, I firmly declared that I had supported them enough, urging them to work hard and support themselves. I severed communication, emphasizing my decision to distance myself from their financial struggles. My father, recognizing the strain in his relationship with my mother, consulted a lawyer and opted for a quieter life in a different place. While I continued to visit my father daily, a friend shared my brother's recent struggles. He had moved into a modest apartment, leading a frugal life. My mother, once a homemaker, faced challenges in her sudden job, while my brother found it difficult to adapt to the opinions of his cyber colleagues. Despite his wife's efforts, she succumbed to the pressure and departed, leaving my brother and mother to navigate their challenges together. Concerns lingered for my mother, who maintained her habit of overspending, accumulating debts. However, I recognized my limitations in offering assistance. Focused on my own endeavors, I worked diligently in a comfortable living space, gradually accessing more resources. Contemplating new ventures, I aimed to spend quality time with my cheerful father, appreciating every moment with him.
Hey, aren't you going to contribute more around the house if you're going to be that kind of wife? Maybe you should just leave. I sat there stunned by my mother-in-law's harsh words. Her cold, intense gaze bore into me. Francisco has us and we don't need you anymore. You always look tired and seem to accomplish nothing, chimed in my unhelpful sister-in-law with a dismissive tone. This is too much, Francisco. Don't you think your mother and sister are going overboard? I pleaded. I'm doing my best. When I sought help from my husband, he responded with a demeaning attitude. I agree with my mother and sister, Francisco interjected. I'm busy with work, and it's becoming a problem if you don't help with the chores. Besides, my relationship with the new part-time girl is progressing, and you're just baggage. Can you quickly pack and live somewhere else? Shocked by Francisco's words, I glanced at the three of them. They all seemed to blame me. A surge of rage welled up in my chest. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and said, I understand. I need some time. My in-laws, who had once relied on me, were now falling apart. My name is Michelle, and I'm 32 years old. I work diligently both at my job and in household chores. While it's not uncommon for women to continue working after marriage, I truly love my job and strive to succeed in the company I joined right after college. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my husband Francisco approached with a pleading look. Michelle, can you take care of this? He handed me a file crammed with receipts and bills. You should manage the cafe's finances properly. I smiled and responded, sorry, but I'm really bad at that. I met Francisco while he was working part-time at a cafe I frequented. After a few chats, we began dating and eventually talked about marriage. Now, Francisco owns the cafe, but despite his ability to run the business, he struggles with paperwork and always asks me to handle the accounting. As I sighed, my mother-in-law added, Michelle, I suddenly feel like eating Chinese food tonight. Could you rinse the rice well? Also, Mia and the kids are coming this weekend, so we need to plan their meals. Sure. I got it. I nodded to my mother-in-law's request and hurriedly left the house. Before marriage, I was excited about my new life with Francisco. However, he suggested, my mom's lonely by herself. Why don't we all live together in our big house? So now I reside with his mother. To put it lightly, she's not proficient in household chores. When we moved in, the house was a bit of a mess after my father-in-law passed away. She started living on a pension, which she mostly spends on dining out or ordering food. Francisco seems to believe that housework is a woman's job, making it my full responsibility. Francisco's sister Mia occasionally brings her kids home, and each time she does, my to-do list grows. I can't help but think that yet another chaotic weekend is approaching. Weekends, which should be precious times for recovering from the usual exhaustion, turn into moments where my sister-in-law's children ask to play or complain about being hungry. I find myself not only preparing meals in the kitchen but also entertaining the children. Then my sister-in-law drops a bombshell. Michelle, I'm getting divorced and will be moving back here with the kids next month. I'm surprised, and for a moment I'm lost for words. Really? Do you have something to say? She asks. No, I was just thinking. When are you moving? I inquire. I want to move as soon as possible. Surprised that my sister-in-law and her children will be moving in, I hope that maybe she will help, and household chores will become more manageable. While we had a normal relationship, I anticipate that this change might bring us closer and result in her contributing to the chores. Despite my positive attitude, reality has other plans. Perhaps because she grew up with my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law appears to live life devoid of housework. She spends most of her time lounging on the sofa, watching TV, and always has some snack with her. Observing her, I realize her neglect of housework might have contributed to her divorce. Now, with the added responsibility of preparing meals for her children and making lunches for kindergarten, my workload increases and my free time diminishes. I had hoped for her assistance, but it's disappointing that it turns out to be a swing and a miss. Then there comes a time when my work at the company suddenly becomes hectic. Every day, I start work early, do overtime, and return home exhausted to find the room overflowing with things, with no space to even walk. Seeing this scene each day, waves of fatigue wash over me. On top of that, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law complain, asking if dinner is ready yet or why I'm home so late when I struggle to manage household chores. They coldly remark, "Michelle, there's a mountain of laundry waiting. Don't slack off just because you're busy." I internally protest, "Mother-in-law, I'm really trying my best." But before my sister-in-law can say anything, I frequently opt to keep my thoughts to myself. "Michelle, are you standing up to your mother-in-law? That's a bit bold, but for the sake of the children, please try a little harder to make homemade meals," suggested my sister-in-law. I couldn't help but respond, "If you have so much free time at home, why don't you help out once in a while?" While doing household chores, I overheard Francisco's sister saying, "Haha, Francisco owns a store, so Michelle doesn't need to work, right? If that's the case, maybe you should try a little harder at home." Behind their words, I felt the mounting pressure that I should be doing more. That night, at the peak of my stress, I decided to speak my mind to friend Isco. "I've been so busy lately, and neither your mother nor your sister is helping out with household chores. It's really hard," I confessed. "Michelle, you're not speaking ill of our family, are you?" Francisco's eyes sharpened a bit, and I braced myself. "That's not what I mean, but it's hard for me to do everything by myself. If you helped out once in a while, things would be a little easier for me," I explained. "I'm busy managing the store. It's different from a regular job. Housework is the wife's responsibility, right?" Even though disappointed by his response, I sat and pondered. A good idea suddenly popped into my head, and I silently pumped my fist. I immediately grabbed my smartphone, opened my favorite online shop, and started adding necessary items to the cart. After completing the purchase, I went to bed satisfied. A few days later, my new electronic household appliances, which would become my lifelines, were delivered to our home. The latest washing machine, a cleaning robot that reaches every corner of the room, and a rice cooker that cooks delicious rice without much effort. Each of them was a savior, making my daily life just a little bit easier and more enjoyable. While setting up the new washing machine, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law suddenly appeared with surprised expressions. "Why, Michelle, you got such a fancy washing machine. But the old one was still good, wasn't it?" Smiling gently, I replied, "The old one took a bit too long, and I heard this new one shortens the laundry time." Their gaze then shifted to the cleaning robot and the new kitchen appliances. "See, I've also upgraded these," I said, showing them off a bit. "All these things, clean robots and convenient cooking appliances. Michelle, come over here for a moment," my mother-in-law said, inviting me inside the room. Seeing the slightly surprised expressions of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I smirked to myself. Francisco sat next to me, and the four of us began our discussion. "Why did you buy so many things?" My mother-in-law raised her voice. "Do you really need all these new appliances? Isn't it just because you want to make things a bit easier?" She continued, "Well, I thought it would be nice if things around the house could run a bit more smoothly." I replied with a slightly troubled expression. My mother-in-law chimed in, "Relying too much on machines, aren't we?" The sister-in-law waved her hand, but I responded, "The appliances we had can still be used." "Francisco is working hard managing his store. Maybe you should be more frugal." Francisco nodded in agreement with his sister, and in a quiet voice, I murmured, "Maybe you're right." There was a hint of anger in my mother-in-law's eyes, and I stumbled over my words. "Are you even considering our household?" "I really am, but I'm just a bit exhausted," I replied. My mother-in-law raised her voice, exclaiming, "Enough. I can't believe you're our daughter-in-law." My sister-in-law, with a disgusted look, added, I'll watch over Francisco. We don't need someone like you here." When I looked at Francisco, he said coldly, "I understand what Mom and Sis are saying. It's a bit difficult to have a wife who doesn't do housework." Looking at Francisco's face, my heart felt heavy. He continued with a cold smile, "I have my own store, so I decide how to use my money. But being with someone who spends on anything and everything might be difficult." I was shaken by his words, but I looked into Francisco's eyes and counted to 10. He added with a hint of cruelty, "Also, I've noticed things have been going well with that new part-time girl. She's more attractive than you are now. Maybe it's time for you to pack up and find a new place to live." A fire of anger surged within me, though I didn't voice it. Taking a step back and calming myself, I replied after a deep breath, "All right, I'll look for a new home that's better." "Finally, you understand. I'll feel much better without you around," he said smugly. Francisco signed the divorce papers that night, and I moved to a nearby weekly rental apartment with just the bare essentials and the divorce paper. No one tried to stop me when I left. Did they ever really care about me? After submitting the divorce papers at the city office, I found a stylish apartment to start fresh. During this time, an unexpected opportunity came my way, a promotion I had been putting off because of my family situation. I seized this chance and began working as a section manager. Every day, as I dedicated myself entirely to my job, I felt a renewed sense of accomplishment. In the midst of these busy days, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my former mother-in-law. I thought we had nothing to do with each other anymore, right? Without checking her message, I swiped to dismiss the call. My new life had begun, and I wouldn't look back at the past. A year flew by. One weekend, as I was relaxing in my room, listening to my favorite music, my phone rang again. To my surprise, it was my former mother-in-law. Wondering what she wanted after all this time, I picked up. "Hello, is something wrong?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment and then asked, "How's your new life?" Despite her probing tone, I replied cheerfully, "It's great. I love my new apartment and work is going smoothly. I even got promoted and am living freely." "That's good, Michelle. Can you come back home?" she asked. Taken aback, I blurted out, "Why?" "We're struggling financially." I thought to myself I knew it, and responded cautiously, "Francisco's store only makes about $1,000 a month, right?" "You know about that?" she asked. Yes, Francisco's store wasn't doing well. I was fully aware of its financial situation since I handled all the accounting. But he pretended to be the successful owner without understanding the real state of his business. It was almost laughable how oblivious he. I handled all the finances and procurement, so of course I sensed her shock. "You knew and didn't tell us." "We had no idea you were doing so well in such a big company, or that you were contributing so much to the household expenses," my former mother-in-law exclaimed. I admitted, yes, I contributed more than $3,000 every month. Thanks to that, you all managed. The truth was I used my salary to bridge the gap in Francisco's business losses. He seemed completely unaware of the situation, and after I left, it seemed reality hit hard. "Michelle, can you please come back?" she asked. Curious, I inquired, "So, how's Francisco's store doing now?" She sighed, "We might have to close soon, and the part-time workers keep quitting." With an inward smirk, I commented on his slightly sloppy management style. It's hard to keep it going for long, isn't it? His little bit of pride doesn't help, not doing proper work. I mean, how many women out there do you think would be willing to support a guy like that? My former mother-in-law was momentarily at a loss for words. I continued somewhat sarcastically, "Wait, I'm a bit busy now since you left. The house is a mess, it's chaotic with things everywhere." Confused, I asked, "Wait, what do you mean?" She described the disarray of their home, with belongings scattered everywhere, looking like a storeroom. Without anyone to cook, they were eating out, which was costing a lot. The washing machine broke down, and it seemed like there's no room in the budget to buy a new one. "Actually, the appliances that you took back, I was really relying on them," my former mother-in-law admitted. Puzzled, I asked, "Huh? Why is that?" "Those were for my convenience. Besides, I bought them myself, so it's okay for me to take them back, right? She reluctantly agreed. Yeah, I guess so. But I never realized housework was this challenging. With a firm tone, my former mother-in-law added, with 3 adults in the house, how can it be that hard? What are friends Isco and your daughter doing? A hint of fatigue could be heard in her voice. As for Francisco, his staff members have been quitting and sales have plummeted. As soon as he found out, he became really downcast and has just been lazing around at home. But Francisco used to spend his money from the store without any restraint, right? On top of that, Mia doesn't help at all. She doesn't do anything around the house and even gets her allowance. To be honest, living on just my pension for the 3 of us is really hard, she continued. I responded with a hint of sarcasm. Mia once told me that I was unnecessary because she was there. My former mother-in-law desperately said, Michelle, we're really in trouble. Living on just my pension for the 3 of us is quite tough. Firmly, I stated, I have no intention of returning to that house. It must be hard living with all that baggage. She seemed to be at a loss for words. Seeing her like this made me feel a bit sorry for her. But as I was about to hang up, my former mother-in-law seemed eager to say something. Michelle, I'm really sorry. Can you reconsider? Her voice sounded a bit exhausted. I replied, I wonder if we can ever spend days together with smiles again. Was it that hard without me? I asked with a mix of surprise and calmness. After a short pause, my former mother-in-law took a deep breath. Yes, there's actually an issue with the property tax. We might have to let go of the house. I see, but I really don't want to get involved anymore. Decide what you're going to do with your family. I hung up without waiting for her next words. After that, I set it up so I wouldn't receive any more calls from her. In my room, holding my favorite mug filled with aromatic coffee, I enjoyed my time alone, looking at the outside scenery. A smile spontaneously appeared on my face. A few months later, when I passed by the cafe where Francisco used to work, I noticed the place was now quiet and empty. Recalling its past liveliness, I felt a bit nostalgic. It seems they really closed the shop. While walking around the old town, I became curious about my former in-law's house and saw a sold sign. Coincidentally, I bumped into an old neighbor in town. According to her, those 3 had quickly sold their house and moved to a small apartment nearby. In their new home, there were always loud arguments and even the smell of garbage. It seems the neighbors are quite bothered, and it has become a bit of local gossip. I thought it must be tough for them, but with a bit of effort, life can change. I wondered why they don't try as I gazed at the old house. These thoughts wandered in my mind. A lot has happened to me since then, but I'm living each day to the fullest. In fact, a handsome guy from my workplace confessed, saying, I really admire your hardworking nature. Now, we're enjoying our dates, and I'm really looking forward to what the future holds. If I get married again, I really want to be happy. I'm feeling very excited about it now.